and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. In Myanmar, protesters in Yangon Commercial District have welcomed the parallel unity government to confront the military. Meanwhile, security forces shot dead 2 demonstrators in the ruby mining town of Mogok. Myanmar has been an upheaval since the military ousted Aung San Suu Kyi, with the junta killing 728 people. The US says any terrorist attack on the military drawdown troops or allies in Afghanistan will be met very forcefully. At a news conference, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Washington is well aware of Taliban threats. Kirby said it would be imprudent for the US not to take these threats seriously. China says talks between the US and Japan have gone beyond bilateral relations and harmed third-party interest. In a statement, China's embassy in the US said Beijing will firmly safeguard its national sovereignty and security. Earlier, US President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga vowed to work together to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. India has lodged a record spike in coronavirus-related deaths with more than 1,300 fatalities in the past 24 hours. It also reported the highest increase in cases for the 4th straight day, with nearly 234,000 new infections. Here in Pakistan, the death toll has surpassed 16,000 after 112 deaths were recorded overnight. Nearly 5,000 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours, with the tally crossing 750,000. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3 million lives and infected more than 139 million people so far. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. In Myanmar, protesters in Yangon Commercial District have welcomed the parallel unity government to confront the military. Myanmar has been an upheaval since the military ousted Aung San Suu Kyi, with the junta killing 728 people. Demonstrators in Yangon continue to call for their New Year strike. Dozens waited for an opportunity between police patrolling to quickly gather in the street. In the ruby mining town of Mogok, security forces shot at 2 more demonstrators. Meanwhile, the junta chief will attend an Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Indonesia on April 24th. A Thai Foreign Ministry spokesperson confirmed Min Aung Hlaing's first known foreign trip since the coup. The US says any terrorist attack on the military drawdown troops or allies in Afghanistan will be met very forcefully. At a news conference, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Washington is well aware of Taliban threats. Kirby said it would be imprudent for the US not to take these threats seriously. He added that it would also be improper for the Taliban to not take seriously what President Joe Biden has made clear. Kirby said there may be some additional enabling capabilities added to Afghanistan for a short time. He said this will help bring about a safe, orderly and deliberately planned drawdown. The press secretary said the US also plans to remove at least some contractors from Afghanistan. The US says Russia's decision to expel 10 American diplomats is exculpatory and regrettable. This comes as Russia told the US diplomats to leave the country after Washington imposed sanctions. A State Department spokesperson said it is not in US interest to get into an escalatory cycle. But the spokesperson said Washington reserves the right to respond to any Russian retaliation. The State Department said US sanctions were proportionate to Russia's harmful activities. Earlier, Moscow also banned 8 high-ranking current and former US officials from entering Russia. Those banned include FBI Director, Director of National Intelligence, and the U.S. Attorney General. U.S. President Joe Biden has called Iran's uranium enrichment unhelpful for the ongoing nuclear deal revival talks. In a press briefing, Biden said he is pleased that Iran has continued to agree to engage in discussions on how to move forward. The president said he believes the U.S. should never have gotten out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. He said it is good that Iran is engaged in talks over what it is needed to allow Washington to return. But he added the U.S. is just not willing to make some concessions. Biden said it is premature to make a judgment on the outcome of the talks. Earlier, an EU representative said Iranian and U.S. envoys will return to their countries for consultations before further talks. China says talks between the U.S. and Japan have gone beyond bilateral relations and harm third-party interest. Earlier, U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga vowed to work together to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. More in this report. It said Taiwan, Hong Kong and Xinjiang are China's internal affairs and should not be interfered with. Biden met with Suga in his first face-to-face White House summit since taking office. In a joint statement, the two leaders underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The statement read, they encouraged a peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues. Later, addressing a think tank, Japanese Prime Minister called for a stable and constructive relationship with China.
Japan's basic policy on pending issues caused by China is to firmly assert what should be asserted and strongly request China to take specific action. At the same time, we must work to establish a stable and constructive relationship with China and keep in close partnership with the United States and other like-minded nations.
The U.S. and Japan also agreed to invest together in areas such as 5G and chip supply chains. Washington pledged $2.5 billion, while Tokyo $2 billion to strengthen digital competitiveness. The Arab coalition in Yemen says it has intercepted another Houthi drone launched towards the southern Saudi city of Jazan. The coalition vowed to take all necessary measures to protect civilians in line with international law. Pakistan has condemned the attack and reaffirmed support for Riyadh against any threat to its territorial integrity. Meanwhile, a Houthi spokesperson said calls for ceasefire in Yemen are insincere as long as the blockade persists. This comes a day after 96 people died in clashes between coalition forces and the rebels for strategic Marib region. At least 2 Palestinians have been injured in Israeli air raids on the besieged Gaza Strip for the second day in a row. Palestinian media said 3 rockets destroyed several settlements and damaged civilian homes. It said missiles were also fired at an open agricultural land between Rafah and Khan Yunis cities. Meanwhile, the Israeli military said it launched the assault on alleged Hamas targets after a rocket was fired from Gaza. Earlier, the occupying forces injured 11 Palestinians in a crackdown on protesters in West Bank in Jerusalem. The US, EU3 and the UK have condemned the attacks on foreign troops in the Iraqi Kurdistan region. In a joint statement, the 5 countries said attacks on US and coalition personnel and facilities will not be tolerated. The statement read the US, the UK, France, Italy and Germany support Iraq and are committed against ISIS. This comes after US and Turkish forces were targeted in 2 separate incidents on April 14th. Earlier, ISIS formally claimed responsibility for a market bomb attack in Iraq's capital, which cost 4 civilian lives. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says many in the West deliberately indulge in Islamophobia under the guise of free speech. In a tweet, Khan demanded an apology from such extremists for hurting the sentiments of Muslims. But he said the perpetrators lack moral sense and courage to apologize to the Muslims. He said the Western governments that outlawed any negative comment on the Holocaust should penalize Muslim haters similarly. Khan said any disrespect and abuse directed towards the Prophet will not be tolerated. Regarding the recent action against the TLP, Khan said no one is above the law and constitution. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is set to reach the UAE on a 3-day official visit. The Foreign Office says the two countries enjoy strong ties rooted in common faith and shared history and values. In a statement, the office said Qureshi will discuss regional and global issues of mutual interest with the UAE leadership. The Foreign Minister will also call on his counterpart, His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. He will hold talks with the UAE's leadership on all areas of bilateral cooperation, including trade and investment. Pakistan's Foreign Office said Qureshi will also meet the Pakistani diaspora and interact with local and international media. In Pakistan, the death toll from the new coronavirus has crossed 16,000 mark. This comes after the virus claimed another 112 lives in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said nearly 5,000 people tested positive overnight. The caseload has crossed 750,000, out of which nearly 655,000 people have recovered. It said there are more than 79,000 active cases across the country. The ministry said just over 4,100 patients are in critical condition. Meanwhile, Pakistan's envoy to UN has urged for universal vaccination to overcome the pandemic and its fallout. India has lodged a record spike in coronavirus-related deaths with more than 1,300 fatalities in the past 24 hours. It also reported the highest increase in cases for the 5th straight day, with nearly 234,000 new infections. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3 million lives and infected more than 139 million people so far. Details in this report. While this week saw a record number of COVID-19 cases in many parts of the world, setbacks to vaccination drive also contributed to government's troubles. Chile says China's Sinovac vaccine, CoronaVac, is 67% effective in the first real-world study of the shot. The U.S. drug regulator has revoked emergency authorization of Eli Lilly's monoclonal antibody treatment when used on its own. Meanwhile, 21 U.S. states recorded at least a 10% rise in daily average positive cases.
In concert with the increase in cases, the 7-day average of emergency department visits, hospital admissions, and hospitalizations are all approximately 5 to 8% higher than they were in the prior 7-day period. And sadly, average daily deaths have increased for the 3rd day in a row.
U.S. pharmaceutical company Moderna says it is struggling to supply promised shots to UK because of issues with increasing production at its European plant. Johnson & Johnson has refuted claims that the design of its COVID-19 vaccine may explain why it has been linked to rare brain blood clots. The World Health Organization says the strain that emerged in India can bring about increased transmissibility.
Having 2 of these mutations, which have been seen in other variants around the world, are concerning because there's a similarity in these mutations that confer increased transmissibility, for example, and some of these mutations also result in reduced neutralization, which may have an impact on our countermeasures, including the vaccines.
The world's largest vaccine maker in India has asked the U.S. president to lift a ban on exporting raw materials needed to make more shots. In Spain, Madrid's public health chief says the shortage of shots may force the region to close down vaccination centers next week. Britain prepares to bid a final farewell to Prince Philip at a ceremonial funeral today. The Duke of Edinburgh died at the age of 99 last week in Windsor Castle. He was the nation's longest-serving consort and had been married to Queen Elizabeth II for 73 years. The funeral will be a muted affair which will take place at St. George's Chapel. The ceremony will be limited to 30 people, including members of the royal family due to COVID-19 restrictions. There will be no public procession and the Queen, who says the death has left a huge void, will sit separately. The order of service for the funeral was agreed with the prince during his lifetime and reflects his close military affiliations. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Eritrea has publicly acknowledged its presence in Ethiopia's Tigray region for the first time. In a letter to the UN Security Council, Asmara agreed to start withdrawing troops from the area. Asmara's UN envoy Sofia Tesfamariam said the looming grave threat in Tigray has been largely thwarted. Tesfamariam said Ethiopian contingents will simultaneously be redeployed along the international boundary. She said the priority should be the delivery of aid to civilians in Tigray. Tesfamariam said the allegations of rape and other crimes lodged against Eritrean soldiers are outrageous. The envoy added that it is a vicious attack on the culture and history of Eritrea's people. In the U.S. state of Minnesota, hundreds of protesters have clashed with the police outside Brooklyn Center's police headquarters. Police arrested dozens as a civil unrest over the killing of a young black carried into the sixth consecutive night. Demonstrators threw objects at the officers, who in turn used tear gas and flashbangs. This comes after the former police officer who shot Donta Wright was charged with second-degree manslaughter. But charges against her have failed to appease protesters, as Wright's family says they fall short of justice. Meanwhile, hundreds of Chicagoans took to the streets in solidarity with the family of Adam Toledo. The 13-year-old boy was shot dead by police on the 29th of March. U.S. President Joe Biden has called for an end to gun violence in the country, calling it a national embarrassment. This comes a day after a shooter killed 8 people and himself at a FedEx Corps facility in Indianapolis. Talking to reporters, he urged Congress to step up and address the issue of gun violence. Biden called for a ban on assault weapons and magazines that hold more than 10 bullets.
This has to end. It's a national embarrassment. It is a national embarrassment what's going on. And it's not only these mass shootings that are occurring. Every single day, there's a mass shooting in the United States if you count all those who were killed out in the streets of our cities and our rural areas. It's a national embarrassment and must come to an end.
3 astronauts have returned to the Earth from the International Space Station. Russia's Roscosmos Space Agency says they landed in Kazakhstan on a Soyuz MS-17 spacecraft. The spacecraft was carrying NASA astronaut Kate Rubins, the first person to sequence DNA in space. It also brought back home 2 Russian cosmonauts, Sergei Ryzhikov and Sergei Kutsverchko. The 3 had been at the space station since mid-October 2020. Their mission was the last scheduled Russian flight carrying a U.S. crew member. It marks an end to a long dependency as the U.S. revives its own crew launch capability to drive down the cost of sending people into space. NASA has picked Elon Musk's SpaceX to develop the first commercial lander and take the next 2 U.S. astronauts to the moon. The contract is worth $2.9 billion and is part of NASA's Artemis program. NASA picked SpaceX over Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin and defense contractor Dynetics Inc. The agency said the SpaceX Starship will include a spacious cabin and 2 airlocks for moonwalks. NASA's acting administrator, Steve Juzerk, said the agency has the next landing shot at 2024. On Twitter, SpaceX said it is humbled to help the U.S. Space Agency usher in a new era of human space exploration. A new study on the Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaurs has revealed astonishing information about one of the most fearsome predators to roam the planet. Details in this report.
A recent study has revealed how lucky humans are for not sharing the planet with the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex. It says the total number of these dinosaurs to ever exist was about 2.5 billion, while 20,000 of them roamed the Earth at once. The research is based on calculations like body size, sexual maturity, energy needs, and geographic range.
The average population density we estimated was about 1 individual per 40 square miles. So perhaps 2 in the area of Washington, D.C., about 1 in the area of Manhattan, about 1 in the area of the city of San Francisco. But I suspect they were clumpy. They were following herds of prey around. So rather than just being like sentinels, 1 every 40 square miles, they probably moved in groups following prey.
The study put the weight of an average adult T-Rex at 5.2 tons, lifespan at 28 years, and a generation time at 19 years. Moreover, the total generations of the species were estimated to be 125,000, which expanded at a geographical range of roughly 89,000 square miles.
I think it probably is the iconic dinosaur. For dinosaur fans, there are others that they often like. The T-Rex is the iconic dinosaur. It is huge. It's got a huge head and huge teeth. It's really scary. I think we like feeling small, and boy, do you feel small when you're standing underneath a skeleton, as I have outside the museum where I work.
Fossils of over 40 T-Rex individuals have been found since it was first described in 1905. The species met a fiery end when an asteroid slammed into Mexico, exterminating 3/4 of the planet's species.
In Spain, a school has taken its classes to the beach for some fresh air after congested online learning due to the pandemic. Online schooling and the absence of extracurricular activities for over a year has surely put a toll on pupils. However, these Spanish scholars have found a way to escape by taking their classroom to the beach. The classes are conducted on the sandy shores of Playa de los Nietos Beach. The teachers begin preparations at 8 a.m. before the children come and sit over the neatly spaced out green desk rows.
It's something completely amazing. It's completely amazing because the children arrived the next day to school and they're like delighted. They feel like they are doing something different from other schools, and then they are asking, when are we going to go again? When are we going to go to the beach again?
Alongside their schoolwork, the children also have fun by running around in the sand and playing the xylophones. The pupils are aged from 3 to 12 and remain in their class bubbles.
People from the village, the fishermen, taught the students how to fish, how to live. They identified the economy that is suffering so much and how they themselves have been able to feed us in the times of pandemic. It is very important for them to know that fish are not in the supermarket, that the fish are in the sea and we have to catch them.
The beach lessons are part of a broader project known as Fresh Air. It aims to create better air quality for children during the ongoing pandemic, including through open-air learning. The U.S. has removed Vietnam and Switzerland from its currency manipulator list. The Trump administration has labeled the two as currency manipulators in December. In a semi-annual report to Congress, the Treasury Department said no country currently meets the U.S. criteria as a manipulator. It said, however, Vietnam and Switzerland, as well as Taiwan, will be under enhanced monitoring. The department said the three exceeded its 2015 currency thresholds during 2020. But it said there is insufficient evidence that they are manipulating their exchange rates to gain a trade advantage or prevent a balance of payments adjustments. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.